Story 1. When it is cold, it is easier to add layers than to cool down when you are very hot. Story 2. When it is cold, you can take measures to protect yourself, but if it becomes too hot, there is no real protection except staying indoors with air conditioning. Story 3. I am cold. I can always add more layers. I can only take so much off. Story 4. Very hot. I grew up in the tropics but have also lived where there are 4 seasons. I am always miserable this time of year. I do not like sleeves or long pants. I prefer flip-flops. If it gets too hot, I can always go for a swim. Move slowly, stay hydrated, and do what you need to in the early morning. When it is cold, you wear 17 layers and you cannot move. Energy bills are high because I cannot put on enough layers to stay warm. Cannot get out and move around. I do not want to salt the sidewalk or shovel snow. Just know. Story 5. You can always add more blankets. You cannot always rip off your skin. Story 6. It's hot. I don't like the cold. It's annoying dealing with anything below 20. Story 7. I dislike both extremes. I prefer very hot weather because I suffer greatly from extreme cold. Story 8. It is cold all day. There is a point where you cannot escape the heat. Conversely, you can bundle up and move indoors to avoid the cold. Story 9. It's very hot. I can always find water to swim in. I would particularly like to live on the coast, as I do now. Story 10. I wanted to move from Vermont to a hot place that offers reasonable access to cold mountains, like Utah, Arizona, or Colorado. Instead, I moved to Canada. I regret it. Story 11. I am definitely very hot. The cold is hell on my skin from eczema and on my joints because of rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. Cold makes all my joints achy and makes it so hard for me to get warm enough to sleep. If I cannot get my feet and legs warm, I cannot sleep because they get that restless feeling and I have to move my legs to relieve it. I use 3 fleece blankets on my bed and I still end up putting on my slipper socks. I want to move from here so badly because the cold damages my body. I also hate all the layers I need to wear, though I do love my boots. I live in the northeastern United States. It has been ridiculously cold here. I can deal with being hot and sweaty much more easily. I just wear tank tops, shorts, and sandals or flip-flops all summer long, and I have air conditioning. Story 12. I would probably complain all day. I don't tolerate extremes, but I guess I prefer the cold. At least I can stay cozy inside. Story 13. In cold weather, I can prevent my testicles from freezing to my leg by adding layers. In hot weather, I cannot prevent them from sticking to my leg. Story 14. I live in Florida. It's the devil's armpit. I hate the heat. Story 15. It is very hot. I live in one already, so I am used to it. It regularly reaches 115 degrees Fahrenheit every year where I live in the Southern California desert. I do not like cold either. If it drops below 35 degrees Fahrenheit, I cannot stand it for extended periods even with a jacket. My face gets numb. I cannot speak or breathe well. Story 16. Hot is okay. You can remove layers and turn on the air conditioning. Cold is okay. You can add layers and turn on the heater. If I had to choose, I prefer cold over hot. Story 17. It is hot. Luckily, there is air conditioning, and tropical places always have more natural color. Life, give me warmth. Story 18. I want to live somewhere with ample groundwater and a long growing season. The rest are details. Story 19. I have lived in both climates, and I choose hot weather because I prefer to see a blue sky every day. It is good for my mental health and my soul. Story 20. Having lived in both, I need to add clarification. I prefer hot and dry over cold and wet. I prefer cold and dry over hot and humid. Story 21. Extreme heat and cold are depressing and make outdoor tasks miserable. Story 22. Cold. It is always easier to warm up than it is to cool down. Story 23. Very cold because you can add or remove layers, whereas in hot weather you cannot be comfortable. Story 24. Cold. Generating more heat is easy. Getting rid of heat is difficult. Story 25. Hot. I really hate the cold. It makes me lose all motivation and energy, and I sit. It sucks when it's hot, but at least I can go outside and not feel like I might die. Story 26. When it's very hot, you can choose to go outside or stay in. When it's very cold, there is no choice. The cold hurts, dries out your skin, and makes me miserable. Story 27. This winter taught me that I would rather live in a very hot place with air conditioning than in a very cold place with heating. It depends on how much I can enjoy the outdoors. I can tolerate heat for an hour, so I can go to the beach or a pool party. When it is very cold, I immediately go indoors. Story 28. It is hot. The cold is miserable and oppressive, but then again, living in the United Kingdom will do that to you. Story 29. I moved from Arizona to Tennessee. The place where I live now does not get very cold often, but right now it is much colder than I like. It makes me miss Arizona in winter. I would prefer neither extreme, but I would move back to Arizona before I moved somewhere with more snow. Story 30. I live in Michigan. It is easier to warm up than to cool down. I can build a fire anywhere. I cannot build an air conditioner without a lot of time, equipment, and know-how. Story 31. When it is cold, it is much easier to bundle up to get warm. When it is hot, it is impossible to cool down outside. Story 32. When it is cold, you can always add more layers. If it is hot, there are only so many layers you can discard before you are arrested. Story 33. This is why I like living in the Midwest of the United States of America. We have both, and by the time I am sick of one, the next season is right around the corner. Too hot is uncomfortable, and I dislike bugs. Too cold is depressing when you go too long without sunlight. Story 34. Hot and dry is good, once you learn how to live in that environment. Hot and humid is appalling. There is no way to cope with it. For cold weather, it depends. For example, Canadians sometimes complain about the cold in Britain because in Canada it is a matter of survival to have a properly heated home, whereas older British buildings are impossible to keep warm. Story 35. In freezing temperatures, I can work outside in a t-shirt without sweating. In hot weather, I start sweating immediately. I prefer not to be drenched in sweat. Story 36. Cold, 1000%. I lived in Saudi Arabia for a few years, and I never want to face that level of heat again. It is crippling and you get nothing done. Story 37. It completely depends on one major factor. Is there a nice beach in a hot climate? The beauty of the ocean is worth the discomfort. If not, I prefer extremely cold weather. Story 38. It's hot. I already live in a cold place. Living here is cheap because no one wants to live here. Story 39. It depends on the definition of very hot or very cold and on the specific living situation, but generally I would go with very cold. Story 40. In cold places, short winter days and January darkness, combined with gray skies, are awful. Story 41. It is very hot. I almost broke my back once because of ice. All ice should be eradicated from the world. Story 42. It is very cold. I was born and raised in Texas and recently moved to Oregon. I have had enough heat for one lifetime. Story 43. I am used to very cold weather. I am accustomed to temperatures as low as -30 degrees Celsius in the winter. When I go to tropical countries in the summer, temperatures reach 38 degrees Celsius. It is humid, there are bugs everywhere, and I can smell everyone's armpits. After 2 minutes, I am soaked and feel disgusting. I miss being able to put on layers and a thick coat to feel comfortable. Story 44. Get me the cold. I hate it here. You cannot be more fresh than naked, since you cannot take your skin off without your doctor freaking out. Story 45. I live in Boston, so yes. No, but actually I would pick cold because it is easier not to die. Story 46. Very cold. Heat is fucking miserable and there is nothing you can do. Get naked? Still hot. If it is cold, just put on more layers and you will be fine. I would take -20 degrees Fahrenheit over 100 degrees Fahrenheit any day. Speaking as someone who experiences both. Story 47. I am built for the heat but dislike the cold in the 30s and below. Story 48. It's hot. I live in Arizona, and I am from Florida. I have no desire to be cold all the time. Story 49. I think sunshine makes the biggest difference for me. I live in Colorado. Winters can be cold, but the sun makes it worth it. I would feel very depressed otherwise. Summers are fun because of longer days and sunlight. Story 50. Hot all day, every day. I feel the cold very easily, and it makes me miserable. Cold feels like it is attacking, stabbing, and restricting my movement. Heat, on the other hand, feels like freedom. I do not even live where it gets technically freezing. Single-digit temperatures in degrees Celsius are the lowest it gets. I have been known to go to bed in winter wearing leggings under fleece track pants, a long-sleeve t-shirt under a fleece jumper, 2 pairs of socks, gloves, and a beanie with ear flaps and ties that go under my head to keep it on. I will be under multiple blankets and still not be able to get to sleep because my face is cold. Having to do all that and still feel the frigid air makes me angry. That is inside and in bed, so you can imagine how miserable the thought of going outside makes me. I always scoff at the claim that you can simply bundle up and add layers in the cold and be fine and cozy. Nonsense. Story 51. Ideally, I would live in a temperate climate that gets warm but not too hot. Between two extremes, I would choose hot. Right now I am living through a deep freeze and dealing with the added cost of oil to heat the house, the equipment to remove the snow, the wear and tear on the cars from salting the roads, the extra clothing required to keep all your fingers and toes intact, plus odd tasks like shoveling a path around the side of the house so the person who delivers the oil can get to the pipe. We missed garbage day last week because we had not yet cleared a path to roll the cans out. Hot weather is not great, but it is certainly less expensive and causes less aggravation. Story 52. It's cold. I live north of the Arctic Circle now. I used to live in eastern France, where summers were often well above 30 degrees Celsius. It was awful at first, although I got used to it after a few years. Story 53. This is a very cold place. My system tolerates chilly to cold weather much better. Story 54. Hot places. The heat is sometimes harsh, but it makes me feel like I am being hugged. The cold is painful and emotionless. Story 55. How hot and how cold. Minnesota sounds nice, but Antarctica sounds like hell. I live in Texas, so it already feels that way. Story 56. I am not used to very hot or very cold weather in the United Kingdom. I will say very hot so I do not have to buy thermal clothing, and I have only 4 pairs of underwear. Story 57. Yes. As a number of people have said, you can affect it by dressing warmly or using blankets. With heat, there is not much you can do. Story 58. Definitely a cold place. It's easier to cope with cold temperatures than with high temperatures. Story 59. Hot when humidity is low, as in United States Southwest deserts. Otherwise, I prefer colder climates. I am tired of heat and humidity. I did not realize how much humidity affected my dislike of hot weather until I went to the Southwest and experienced temperatures of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or higher with very little humidity. Felt great. I did not feel particularly hot until we reached Hoover Dam, and it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit. That felt like too much for extended periods. I live in the Mid-Atlantic, where summers reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit with 80% or more humidity and winters drop into the single digits. Story 60. I prefer a hot place and to sit at a nice, cool bar all day, getting slightly drunk. Story 61. Hot. Give me 100 degrees or more every day. Anything below 70 degrees is too cold. Story 62. I have lived in both far northern Alaska and South Africa. I grew up in South Africa's heat. In summertime, it can reach upwards of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and in Alaska it reached minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit and colder. Often. The heat is unpleasant, but the cold can be deadly quickly. Story 63. Cold. I have lived in South Florida and the upper Midwest. I will take cold or 4 seasons every time. Story 64. Thinking long-term helps. I'm from a hot place and now worry about forest fires. I live in a cool, mild climate that never freezes. I never thought I'd say this, but I prefer milder weather to hot. I'm in another country now. Story 65. I live in a very hot place. I miss the cold. Being warm feels much better when it is cold outside. Story 66. I'm cold. I'm tired of the South Texas humidity killing all hopes and dreams by putting everyone into a vegetable steamer. If only I had the financial means to move, though. Story 67. I cannot ice fish, snowmobile, snowshoe, or ski unless it gets cold. I prefer cold to heat. Story 68. I find cold air much cleaner and better smelling. When it is hot, people and things smell, bugs are everywhere, and you sweat, feeling sticky and uncomfortable. Cold is just better. Story 69. I don't mind the cold. I bundle up and love hot springs. Story 70. Very cold and very hot places breed all kinds of reptiles, insects, and arachnids that I do not want to deal with. Story 71. I already live in a place that gets 100 degrees Fahrenheit in summer and minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit in winter. Story 72. I have lived in Bahrain. 135 degrees Fahrenheit with 80% humidity. Cold is better than that pure, unadulterated hell. Story 73. Find a warm area to relax in the shade. Winter makes it impossible to be outside. Story 74. In hot weather, especially in summer, the vibe and environment are happier. People dress more loosely, go on walks, and exercise. People in general become more active. The cold is depressing. Story 75. I live in Buffalo and rarely wear a coat unless I'm outside for an extended period of time. Why do you think? Story 76. If we are talking about extreme temperatures like below freezing when everything outside is frozen, or so hot that my shoes melt to the road, then it is probably the heat. Story 77. It is hot. You can get used to the heat, go out, meet people, and have a social life in the shadows. The cold slows you down. Story 78. Honestly, that is why I like the United Kingdom. We get variety throughout the year. But if I had to choose, I would choose cold because it is easier to put on more clothing and warm up than it is to cool off. Story 79. I absolutely hate the cold weather. I feel like I have to spend more time indoors, which I have no desire to do. I want to be able to go out and run errands without feeling like I am living in Siberia. Story 80. I feel very hot. When I am near water, I am more comfortable wearing fewer clothes or going shirtless than wearing more clothes. Story 81. It is hot. I have cold urticaria, which means I am literally allergic to cold and break out in hives all over my body. I live in Las Vegas and cannot wait for summer to return. Story 82. As long as I am not risking hypothermia or frostbite, 100% a very cold place. I am totally fine layering as needed. Why are bodies kept in morgues? Laughing out loud, for preservation, of course. Even ideas stay fresher in the cold. It is invigorating, sharpens the mind, improves sleep, and keeps metabolism in check. I would never choose a hot place, also known as forced death, mosquitoes, heat exhaustion, dehydration, lethargy, and psychologically oppressive vibes. No, thank you. Story 83. I hate the cold. In winter, I never get warm and I hate going outside. In summer, when it is hot here in Texas, I can wear skimpy clothes, enjoy the air conditioning, and take multiple showers. Right now it is in the 30s and I hate it. Story 84. Cold is objectively the better choice. There are no insects, and you can always add more layers or build a larger fire. Story 85. Hot. Even though you can add layers, I like spending most of my days outside. It's pretty rough spending a lot of time in sub-zero temperatures. Story 86. Before having children, I preferred the cold because I could bundle up and did not like being hot. After having children, I prefer the heat because taking toddlers out in the cold is a nightmare. Story 87. I prefer very hot weather because I am used to it. Living in snow does not seem fun to me. Story 88. Cold places are usually dark, and the lack of sunlight makes me depressed. Story 89. I live in one of the hottest cities in the United States. It is easier to stay comfortable in the cold than in the heat. The heat here can be deadly, and there is little you can do. There is no water or shade. Story 90. Definitely a hot place. I'd rather sweat profusely than freeze, and I must be part reptile because it's easy for me to freeze when it's below 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The 90 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit range is super comfy to me. Story 91. Is this a threat? I mean, very cold because at least it kills you slower than heat does, I think. Story 92. I stay cold because when I get hot, it makes me angry. I am not proud of that. Story 93. Cold weather does not bother you if you are dressed properly. Hot climates tend to have higher rates of crime and homicide. Story 94. It is definitely cold, so I will dress warmly. The heat is harder to handle. Story 95. I prefer cold environments. Being in very hot places is bad for my health, and I dislike being sweaty. Story 96. It is very hot. Probably because I live in Arizona and I am used to it, but when it gets cold, which for me is around 60 degrees, it is pleasant for a little while. I hate waking up cold and going out to work. I cannot imagine living in much colder conditions. On the plus side, low energy bills from not having to run air conditioning around the clock during the summer are very nice. Story 97. Cold really does eliminate invasive species before they can get a foothold. It also does the same for humans. Story 98. Despite being built like a Nordic caveman, I tolerate prolonged heat better than prolonged cold. Do not ask me why, but that is just how it is. Story 99. I live in the Minneapolis area. If I could, I would move farther north for colder winter temperatures. I love the cold. Story 100. Hot. I currently live somewhere with both. Admittedly, winters here are mild compared to many places. I still hate January more than July. Story 101. It is hot. My birthday is in the summer, so I have conditioned myself to look forward to the heat. Story 102. Hot for sure. I hate having to put on a bunch of clothes and boots just to take out the trash. Cold usually brings snow with snowy roads, ice on roofs, plowing, and so on. I can't get my boat out or use other summer toys. Story 103. I grew up in Texas but lived in Boston for 10 years. I would rather live in Boston, even though it is very cold. Texas heat is oppressive, and it is worse when the electrical grid goes out and there is no air conditioning. Story 104. I feel like I eventually acclimatize more to heat than to cold. For some reason, being cold always feels horrible. I absolutely hate showering, getting out of bed, or stepping outside and suffocating under layers of clothing when it is cold. I also get dry skin and chapped lips from all the indoor heating. I hate winter. Story 105. My preference is a daily temperature between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. However, I live in Western North Carolina, and right now we are experiencing snow with single-digit temperatures. I like seasons but do not like extremes. Story 106. I live in a very hot, humid place, so I prefer cold weather. I can't be outside most of the year because my body doesn't handle heat well, so I am more tanned and in better shape during the winter. Story 107. I love heat and hate the cold. I'm able to comfortably chill in the sun with a hoodie, as long as it's not humid. Story 108. Hot. Please. It uses less energy to lower the temperature by 10 degrees Fahrenheit than to raise it by 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, temperatures will be about 68 to 88 degrees year-round. Here in south-central Nebraska, it rarely reaches 100 degrees Fahrenheit for more than a week at a time, but temperatures drop below 0 degrees Fahrenheit more often. Story 109. I prefer very hot weather because when I feel cold I feel it in my bones and it takes a long time to warm up. The south of England was too cold for me, and I lived in Cyprus many years ago. I am currently struggling with a mild winter, laughing loudly. Story 110. A temperate place, of course. Why would you choose to live somewhere that is too cold or too hot? That is dumb. Story 111. I feel cold. Ever since having my daughter, I feel nauseous when I get too hot. Story 112. Cold climates keep insects and other pests away. They are easier to heat. You can grow food if you can manage the heating and lighting costs. Water is easier to find as snow, ice, or permafrost. Story 113. Warm weather allows me to have a swimming pool. There is no need to look for gloves or a hat. It is more aesthetically pleasing. Most hot places cool down at night. People tend to be less reserved in warm climates, which makes them more fun. Story 114. Hot. Because I find being too cold more uncomfortable than being too hot. Story 115. I would not, because being very hot or very cold is less comfortable than being moderate. Story 116. It's cold. You can only take off so many clothes before you get yourself into trouble. Story 117. Cold. You can put on more clothes to get warm, but you cannot take off your skin when you are naked and it is hot. I grew up in South Florida and now live in the Pacific Northwest. I prefer the cold and cannot stand Florida anymore. Story 118. I prefer it hot and humid. I do not like being dry or cold. Story 119. Hot. Because it's more pleasant, and hotter places usually have air conditioning. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.